CEDEN. That's right. Okay, now we are recording our CEDEN user group meeting. So welcome everyone. I'm Tessa. So we've got some items on our agenda today. I think hopefully we'll be able to get through within the hour, and we should have time for discussion and questions as well. So just, I gave this same sort of introduction last time, but just if anybody's new or just kind of want to remind you all, we have a great team of staff right now working on CEDEN. So like I said, I'm the database manager, and then we have a vocabulary management team, which includes myself, Jennifer Salisbury, and Candace Hines, who I believe are on the call as well. And then we also have our CEDEN 2.0 transition lead staff, Keenan Smith, who's helping us with notes and recording.
And share your screen. Are you trying to share your screen?
Darn it!
It's not sharing.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, when I started recording, I think it booted out the content.
Okay. Yes, I forgot that piece too. Okay, great. Here we go. Here's our list of staff. But as always, we request that you don't email specific staff. If you have questions, it's better just to send it to the CEDEN inbox because we all check it and then we make sure it gets to the right person. And, sometimes we take turns answering things. So our main contact is still just CEDEN at Waterboards. But I like you to know who all our great staff are. Okay, I think we're all functioning now. So our first item I wanted to share with you all is Candace, our amazing flowchart maker, has done it again. Marco, go ahead. Do you have a question on something else? Okay. Marco, if you have a question, you can ask it right after I explain this, I guess. So we created a new flowchart, kind of describing the vocabulary request process, just because we get a lot of questions of how long is it going to take for my vocabulary to be in the system, and we thought this visual would help. And so I'll show where this is posted on the website, but I'll walk you through. I think many of you probably know this, but hopefully, maybe you can share it with other people too who are new to requesting vocabulary to CEDEN. But, it starts with a user making a request in the vocab request template. And then it goes through an initial review where, staff look at it, decide if it's, if we can add it or if we have questions. And at least here at Waterboards, we usually try to return that within 3 to 4 business days. And then if your vocabulary is approved, we will add that to the system, usually that same week. And then that over the weekend goes through a process where it gathers all the new vocabulary added either from our system and the other RDCs, and all of that added by all of the different systems gets another secondary review. So then we review that again, our vocabulary staff, to just make double check, that there's no mistakes or questions that remain. So if in that secondary review it gets approved, then over the weekend it goes through another system process where they actually get added to the CEDEN lookups and to the CEDEN checker. So then those vocabulary can be used to submit data. If in the secondary review there's questions or something needs to be corrected, that goes back to whoever originally input the vocabulary or the requester to resolve the issues. And then so it's going to be another week before those can get approved, go through the secondary review, and then get approved into the system. So the minimum time would be 2 weeks from your request that it could take for the vocabulary to get into the system for you to submit data. It often can take 3 or more weeks if there's a lot of back and forth and questions on the vocabulary. So we just wanted to share this with everybody, and We have it posted on the vocabulary request webpage right now. It's like right at the top, the request, CEDEN vocabulary request process overview. So if anyone's looking for it, that's where it is. And we've also just been sending the link to people who are vocab requesters and asking about how long will it be. So hopefully that's a useful resource for people. And then another update we made on vocabulary is we just recently updated the vocabulary request template that we have posted on our CEDEN webpage. And now it includes like the character limits for at least all the required fields. And then there was several fields that I discussed last time that we are changing the character limit. We're actually reducing it to be compatible with our CEDEN 2.0 system that we're working on. And just as a reminder, that's the station code, parent project, method name, and digest extract method. Those 3 or 4 fields all got reduced. And so those are reflected in this new template that is up on the web page. But so on each tab, in that vocab request template, there's a tab for every possible lookup list, just about. And so each one now has these character limits, and if it's text or numeric. And so like on those few where we reduced it, we did those in bold red to just kind of give people a heads up, like this might be different from what you previously had. Okay, and then that's also posted on that same vocab request template webpage. So this request template was updated in just about a week ago. So that's up, and you've already seen it in use. Okay. Oh, okay. Marco has a question back on like our CEDEN staff. So he asked if someone was rehired for Jarma Bennett's position, who had been the previous CEDEN manager. And so, yes, someone was hired in Jarma's previous position. Her name is Kieran Cower. And basically, she is taking on other programs. And so because we were working on CEDEN 2.0 and integrating that with SWAMP database, the plan in the long term was already to shift CEDEN to my unit. And so we just did that now. We finally made that clear in these last few months that CEDEN is now under my group and not really under her group, although some of their staff still help with some of our processes. So we kind of have a group effort. Okay. All right, so back to vocabulary. Okay, Chris Jimerson, go ahead before I move on.
Yeah, hi, Tessa. Chris Jimerson. I have a question on the vocabulary sheet. There is a tab there that says chart, and it seems to be tied to the constituent. I was wondering how that is used.
Yeah, I just noticed that yesterday. That's a little mistake. So we'll probably update it again soon just to take that tab out. That was not intended to be included.
Okay.
I was hoping nobody would notice, Chris. But thank you. We appreciate your eyes.
I noticed it yesterday too.
I know. It's like, how did I not notice this before? But it takes a village here. So we appreciate everybody who gives us feedback. Okay, so vocabulary updates. Probably the RDCs have noticed this the most. I don't know if other users have really noticed, but we are currently working on aligning the vocabulary in our current CEDEN system with our in development CEDEN 2.0 system. And so as we do that, we're kind of reviewing the vocabulary and seeing, is this still good vocabulary that we want to add to the new system, or is it time to, end and retire these vocabulary in both systems? So, we don't continue on using vocabulary that is maybe not fully following our business rules. So we've been kind of going through and cleaning up a lot of our lookup lists and ending the use of vocabulary that don't follow our business rules. And Keenan has really been leading that effort. Keenan, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else specific about kind of what you've done so far or what's coming next, just to give people a heads up.
Yeah. My name's Keenan. I've been tasked with supporting the rollout of CEDEN 2.0. We've been, as Tessa said, been working to align the vocabulary between CEDEN and CEDEN 2.0, so you don't have to re-request all that vocab be put into CEDEN 2. As it is now, the process of updating vocab is largely a manual one, but we're building tools that will speed up future updates, and we have plans to further automate and speed up the process using scripting. And because there will be a few years of overlap operation between the two systems, the goal is to have near real-time vocab updates. So on the same weekly time step as CEDEN 1 for those updates is the hope. In the current round of updates, we're close to finishing project and chemistry related vocab. As we've been bringing vocabulary into CEDEN 2.0, some data issues have surfaced and we've been cleaning up as we go. Again, as Tessa said, apologies to the regional data centers. They probably feel like they're getting more update coordination emails than they'd like. We do try to dole them out in bite-sized chunks so as not to require too much of their time in any given week. But I will say that for a database the size of CEDEN with as many contributors as it has, the errors we've come across have been surprisingly few. Some examples of the issues we've found are, typographical errors like extra spaces are pretty common. Not meeting current business rules for CEDEN, constituents that had end dated parts and so needed to be end dated themselves, constituents that had incompatible combinations of parts. Thanks to Stacy for noticing some of those. And another issue is incorrect cast numbers. We've found several of those, and that's going to be even more important come CEDEN 2.0 because the CAS registry number is a key field in its table in that database, whereas CEDEN 1 or CEDEN is more forgiving on that front because it's not a key field. And another issue that we're addressing is caused by the fact that, as Tessa mentioned, some of the character limits are lower in CEDEN 2.0. So we're hoping to head those problems off going forward by imposing the lower limits on all new vocabulary going into CEDEN. But there was existing vocabulary that had already been shortened, and we've been tracking those in kind of a crosswalk reference table to relate the long names with the short. And then finally, we're not migrating a lot of unused vocabulary to CEDEN 2.0. So vocabulary that hasn't been used in many years or not at all won't be moved in this first go around. That's all I had. Thanks, Tessa.
Awesome. Thanks, Keenan. And then I see there's a question in the chat. Okay, Jennifer, you go ahead.
So my question is, how are we going to deal with the analytes that don't have CAS numbers? Because I feel like, especially with like the IDAs, we've had issues with that.
Yeah, there's lots of those, especially, the more organic chemicals. And so the CAS field, it's actually alphanumeric in CEDEN 2.0. So we just need to have some sort of unique identifier. It doesn't, if it's not an official CAS number, because you can't find one, then we just create our own unique identifier to put in that field.
Okay.
Okay, and then there is this question in the chat from Abigail. Will you have guidelines for abbreviations if the method name is more than 20 characters? I'm concerned multiple people may reduce characters in different ways. Yes, we are working on those. So luckily for a lot of the standardized methods like EPA, standard methods, ASTM, those usually are pretty short and don't exceed the 20 characters. It's more the lab specific SOPs that I'm most concerned about. And I'm hoping to have guidance in our next version of the vocabulary request template, which we hopefully will have out by our next CEDEN user group meeting. So that is in the works because we have the same question, but just weren't quite ready to put it out there yet. Okay, and then for some reason we have a lot of discussion on matrix names. So last meeting, we had an item on potentially updating the effluent matrix description to include stormwater MS4 discharge. And so we're going to continue and wrap up that discussion at this meeting. And then I wanted to announce we added a new matrix for toxicity testing specifically. And then I want to talk about the lab water matrix and just the term sample water and surface water. So lots of matrix discussion here. So from last meeting in May, if you weren't here or don't remember, we discussed the effluent matrix description. And so basically, I was proposing to update the description of the effluent matrix to specifically include MS4 stormwater discharge. But then various user group members sort of counter-proposed that maybe MS4 stormwater discharge should be added to the runoff matrix description instead. And so we had just kind of put the item on hold to consider the feedback and do a little more research with our internal folks. So basically I am coming back to the same proposal and of adding stormwater MS4 discharge to the effluent description, not runoff. And the reason is that after I was talking to our regional board and permitting staff, really what we're trying to distinguish here is sort of like point source versus non-point source. And so we want the effluent matrix to be specific to our point source discharges, and those are those that are permitted by NPDES permits, which is wastewater and MS4 stormwater. There are other types, but I guess these two, those are already included. So like the industrial, and there's also construction, but the one that people were really missing and focused on was this municipal storm sewer system discharges. So the feedback I got is that MS4 stormwater is considered effluent, and so it belongs in the effluent description, and that's the best way that we as the water boards can distinguish when, if we're just assessing surface water, we're going to ignore everything that's reported under effluent, versus if we are looking to see if someone correctly complied with their monitoring requirements in their permit to monitor their effluent, then we can, look based on that description of effluent. Okay, question from Abigail, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I didn't realize the co-pilot needed permission before I could talk.
No.
Are you at all concerned though, because like you left out the very important fourth S of the MS4, it's municipal separate storm sewer system, and it's not effluent because it is just runoff because we're not doing anything to it. It's rainfall that runs off into our facilities and then is discharged. But anything discharging from that could be from the entire drainage area, and that the MS4 operators have no control over. So I just wondered if you guys had thought about that, because it's not really point source at that point. It's literally runoff from rainfall. I mean, we all put on our catch basins that only rain down the drain, ideally. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, this is the feedback I heard from people who work in NPDS permitting and write MS4 permits, that it is considered by the Clean Water Act a point source. So that's what I am going to rely on. But I get it that a lot of people don't, it doesn't feel like the same type of point source as wastewater, but that is how the Clean Water Act and NPDS regulations are written. So the runoff, this current description really refers to non-point source runoff. So that's why we are not going to include that MS4 in that description. Okay, go ahead, Stacy.
Would it be helpful to add that to the two descriptions? This refers to non-point and the other refers to point source, to further clarify it for people of when to use runoff versus effluent for stormwater?
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, we probably have room in there in the character limit to include that. So I think that's a great amendment. Okay, any other questions, comments on that effluent description and where to put the stormwater? Okay.
This is Shiyang from DPR.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very important to distinguish wastewater from stormwater from the perspective of data analysis. I think it's wastewater is a very different, wastewater effluent is very different. So if there's a way to differentiate them, maybe adding a new vocabulary so that they're not designated both as affluent, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. I guess that is another consideration you could think about. So, Cass, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe you mentioned it or we're still in the planning stages, but what would happen to the current samples that we have in CEDEN? Are they going to be updated to effluent if you have a runoff matrix?
No,
have we
we're
not
not
gotten
getting
that far yet.
Well, I guess we're not getting rid of the runoff as a matrix. So I wasn't thinking that we'd be changing runoff to effluent. I was just, does that make sense? Like we're just updating the description of effluent, nothing else. So that when people report and they're reporting MS4 discharge, they know which matrix to use.
Okay.
And Cajun, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm about the runoff matrix description. I would prefer that we keep as much detail on that as possible, just because in the current environment, rules and regulations may be changing. And it would certainly be better to know if it's coming from a source point pollution or, what exactly the runoff is. So I'm trying to follow along with this discussion of, effluents, but I think it's very important to know if it's surface water just from a rain event or if it's coming out of a point source pollution. That would do a completely different analysis of it. And, with what's going on in DC, we wouldn't want to be comparing, a rainstorm to, some other point source pollution.
Okay.
I'm
mean,
just saying I'd rather keep the level of detail so it's very clear. And if we don't use those fields, we don't use them. So keep the options open.
Sure. Yeah.
Because especially
So,
for data analysis, that's really important.
yeah. So I guess to be clear, we have a runoff matrix now. This is the current description of it. We are keeping this. We have an effluent matrix now. This is the current description, and this was my proposed update to it. And so I think I liked the amendment of clarifying that this is for point source discharge. And then I'm going to take back and consider maybe we create a wastewater effluent and a stormwater effluent as two separate matrices. Yeah, I'm gonna discuss. We had a couple of regional board folks who brought this up and requested this, and so I just want to make sure we're meeting their needs. And I think that having two separate ones would meet their needs. And I'd be interested to hear from our integrator report staff too, if that would be helpful or not. So it looks like I'll be reporting back on this again in December with sort of our final decisions, or hopefully our final decisions. Okay. So unless there's any further questions or comments on the effluent matrix, then I think we'll move on. Okay, and if you have anything else in the future, we can, put it in the chat or something. Okay, so not sure how many folks in this group are involved with toxicity testing, but I did just want to make an announcement that we have a new matrix that we added, and it's for a specific type of toxicity test where the lab sets up like an alternate control to test if the conductivity or salinity of the sample water is affecting the test organisms. So in toxicity testing, usually you have a negative control, which is just, laboratory prepared water. But in some cases you have a high or low conductivity or a high salinity in your sample that you collected, and you want to know if that is affecting the organism. So we have this alternate control. The sample type code is CNSL, and it wasn't clear what matrix to use for those tests because it isn't really just blank water. So we created this blank water modified, and the description says it's specifically for use with the CNSL test type sample types. So hopefully that's really clear that this matrix only has this very specific use, and people shouldn't be using it for anything else. So just wanted to let people know about that if they notice that in the lookup list. Stacy, go ahead.
So kind of a two-part question. When I first saw this, I thought it was because in CEDEN 2.0, all of the control samples were going to be moved to matrix. And so that's why I thought that you were starting this process. But we have other controls that are valid in the lookup that are also modified. But there's no new matrix for those. So those would still be blank water with their current sample type, because I believe in the mapping, there's a comment that all of the tox sample types are going to be moved to matrix. And if we have a general one that's of modified, that's used for just salinity, that doesn't allow for the other three types to move unless they're more specific. I might not be clear in my question, but
okay.
It seems like we have blank modified, and this is for salinity, but we also have a control for pH and a control for antibiotics. And, would we just use blank water like we currently are for those, even though those are modified?
That's a great question. And obviously we made this addition based on our personal case study that we were working through. And I guess sort of forgot about all those other ones because we don't see those as often in our data. So I think that's a good point that I forgot there's like the modified for pH and other ones. So I think we could update the description that it's like if the test is modified for any of those particular reasons, that this would be the right matrix. And so the part of what came up, why this came up is because we saw a lot of labs using lab water instead of blank water. And then that gets me to the next topic is the definition of lab water is unprocessed laboratory tap water,
Right.
Which is probably not what they were testing. So I like your amendment to this description of this modified blank water. So I think we'll keep it specific for toxicity tests, but it's like those tests where a standard negative control, you need to modify, you're doing an additional control to test for those water quality parameters that may be different. And I see there's a couple notes in the chat. Yeah, okay, so Tori's agreeing with that proposal. I also like it. Any spike is modified blank water. Okay, I'm not sure about that comment, but any other comments on this? I like the modifications here of, go ahead, Tori.
I think that unknown user, I don't know who said it, but it was a great point, is that if like, for chemistry, if you think about it for chemistry, like an LCS, a laboratory control spike is, it's just spiked blank water too. So it's looking through the chemistry lens, if you were to see the blank water modified, I think that's where he's going. So and even matrix spikes are modified sample water, but I think that's where he's going. There's a good point.
I see that. Yes. Yeah, I guess I really okay.
Will we be losing the sample type of the controls in CEDEN 2.0?
Oh yeah, that was the other point I wanted to address. No.
Yeah, so
we still have sample types.
Right. So if
the
control is being moved to the matrix, if you only have one matrix if you only put one in, you wouldn't necessarily be able to have the multiple. Some batches have both a CNEG and a salinity, or multiple controls in a batch. How would you distinguish unless you specifically made 4 different matrices for the 4 or 5 different controls?
So we will still have sample type. So the sample type will still distinguish things.
Okay. There was just a comment on the mapping, and I know it's an older version, but it had said, for the tox in the common field, it said it was moving to matrix. So that's the only reason why I was
I don't remember that version, and we haven't, to my knowledge, we haven't even started working on tox at all. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it was just the CEDEN 2.0 mapping Excel file we had. So okay, that's good.
Okay, Tori.
Do you need the blank water modified when you have the sample type code indicating that it was updated? Like just like thinking of chemistry and it all together as a whole. What was the reason behind putting the modified? Like because there was a concern that you wouldn't know that it's modified because you're not looking at the sample type or something.
That's a good question. Something? Oh, sure, go ahead, Jen.
I thought that this was just because the tox templates are different than the chemistry one, because blank water works for chemistry because there is the The like, just forgot what the column was. We were just talking about it.
Sample
It
type?
identifies that it's a laboratory control sample, but is the issue that the tox templates don't?
No, they do. They do.
They do.
Yeah, I guess I was just we were seeing in the data that people were putting wanted to put a different matrix for like a CNSL versus a CNAG. And yeah, I see your point that we could just say like, no, just put blank water, because even though it's a little different than the blank water of your CNAG, it's still considered, I guess maybe because it is possible that like it's blank water that has enough conductivity or salinity in it that you may see effects on the organisms, whereas like with blank water for a negative control, you would expect to see no effect. You expect to see no effects. So maybe it felt different in that way. But this is all food for thought, and I'm happy to keep working on this. Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Just a question, instead of calling it blank water modified, why don't you just call it blank water underscore CNSL?
Yeah. That's a possibility, but then Stacy was bringing up that there's these other ways to modify as well that maybe we would want to include. So I think there's sort of like a few different directions we could go, and we'll take your feedback and see what we can come up with to best meet everybody's needs. This is why we have these meetings, guys.
Yeah. Sometimes you're so focused too on just doing that one thing, and then when you step back and look at it all, it kind of helps.
Totally. Okay. Well, appreciate the feedback, and I know we're taking good notes. So we'll think about all the options. Okay, now moving on to the lab water matrix. This has just been coming up for me as I've seen people requesting this in their constituents or submitting it, and I just don't think most people are actually testing lab water based if this is the actual description. So I think I'm this one, I'm just getting feedback. I don't have a proposal of what to do, but just sort of like, based on this description, I can't really imagine any situations where this would be an appropriate matrix to use. And so I don't know if there's some people know if your program is using it. Are they actually using it correctly, or do they kind of think it means something else? And I'm kind of like, do we need this matrix, or is this are people using this sort of as another blank water? And do we just want to push them to use blank water? So this one, I'm soliciting feedback before we make any changes. So I see some comments in the chat of like, is this used to distinguish like Milliq blank water or like a lab RO system? So go ahead, Lisa.
Coming from a lab and putting the CEDENs together, I have never used the lab water matrix. I only use the blank water and the sample water. But we only do irrigated lands water. There are some cases where we don't use the standard reagent grade water for a few newer tests, because it suppresses some of the compound recoveries. So we actually do use our lab water, tap water, but there's nowhere for that to be on the reports. There's nowhere that it says that. That's just basically in the SOP. for the laboratory, and it may not be the same for all laboratories, but that would be the only time I can think of when we would maybe use a lab water matrix, and it would have to be some way to notify the data inputters that it's a lab water.
So you're saying there's a few things where you actually might use that for like a QC sample?
I'm thinking like the 533, EPA 533 for one of the PFAS methods.
Mhm.
Since I'm not actually in the lab, I just hear it bandied about. I think there was a time when the reagent grade water was replaced with the tap water in the method.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Tori?
Both of our labs, PER and AquaScience, utilize that code. We've been using it forever. Now I can triple check with them and make sure that the lab water description still works, but I still remember being, a long time ago too, that Tox was lab water because it didn't fit the blank water description. So it was I just remember it built for it. So, but we could triple check with PER and AquaScience.
Yeah, and I guess now this is feeling related to the previous discussion because we've seen it in our tox reporting as well, the use of lab water. And so I'm wondering if maybe we just need a sort of water, if it's lab water or something, that is sort of like specific to toxicity testing, because we know that they sort of like mix up their own blend that is known to be like supporting the organisms. And so maybe we just need a matrix that's actually kind of specific to that, and that would solve the previous issue as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like historically I've always used lab water for tox and then blank water for our chemistry.
Right.
So it's already in my mind.
Yeah,
switched
we have
out
the
for tox
same
and
in all our historic data, but I'm just like, they're not just using tap water. It's like EPA modified, hard, whatever that they mix up. So, okay.
we can check with our lab though what they would call it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And maybe we just keep it called lab water, but we update the description to actually match how people are using it.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll double check and we'll get back with you. We can just send a quick email to them.
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate that. Any other feedback on this? I'm kind of liking the idea of blank water should be for chemistry and then another term for toxicity. That would help my mind, I think.
Yeah, it's always been in my brain that way.
Okay. If no other comments, I'll move on to, this is another one where I'm just sort of putting it out there, seeking input, feedback. So right now, our sort of standard that we use for, water quality samples, our standard matrix is sample water. And the description specifies it's ambient surface water collected in the field. So a decision was already made that in CEDEN 2.0, we're not going to call it sample water, we're going to call it surface water. And so I'm just interested in any feedback of like, we could actually make that shift in CEDEN as well, like, now, or we could just continue on with sample water in CEDEN for now. And then when we transition to CEDEN 2.0, it's going to be called surface water. But ideally, they should mean the same thing. We just thought surface water was more clear than sample water because sample water sort of, if you don't read the description, sounds like you could take a sample of a lot of different kinds of water. So that was our thinking. And okay, Marissa, got a comment.
Yeah, I two questions. So, do you, and I'm sorry if you already said this, do you guys have an idea of when CEDEN 2.0 will be in full, like once we fully transition over to that?
Yeah, I didn't say that yet because I that is the last agenda topic, but
Oh, okay, sorry,
we
yeah.
expect in 2026. But yeah,
Okay.
I'll give more detail in a little
Sure.
bit.
And then one more question, for surface water, would it be maybe ideal, even if we just transferred it over now, while we're just in the CEDEN that we are in right now, just to kind of get ahead, but it'll still be considered the same thing?
Yes, that's the idea, is it should be the same thing,
Okay,
but we're
okay,
just trying to use clearer vocabulary.
got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is Amanda.
Hi, coming from the integrated report, having dealt with a lot of this data in a manual fashion, it seems to me like everything that I see is called sample water, regardless of whether it is ambient or not. And that can create a lot of problems, especially when we're comparing it to data from other programs like CWIX.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we would want to do with that now. Like, we certainly wouldn't want to do a conversion.
Right. Yeah, I see. Right. That if we all of a sudden made all the historic results that are currently called sample water, surface water, that would not be true for everything. So I think that's a great point, that we wouldn't want to just switch that name and have all the results change their name. Okay, and then Tori, I think you were next, or no, I'm losing track.
Well, I don't know if Stacy was next or.
I'm probably going to say what you're going to say, Tori.
Oh, well, I'm thinking of just our whole system. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a big change on
It's a
our
big
part,
change.
and it's a huge, like that could trickle down to everything that we got. So I wouldn't make that. I like the historical comment too, and then just thinking of our system as a whole. I would just like some time to really think about that and how much time it would have, how much that would affect us, and how much time it would take for us to update things. And because we deal with groundwater and surface water, so everything, when we're pulling things all together, it mixes. So we call out sample water all the time. So it just it'd be kind of it might be a big pull for us in terms of our tools.
Yeah, and this was a last minute addition, just because we were deep in looking at matrix things, and I was just thinking about it. So I wasn't actually thinking we should make this shift immediately or now. But I guess maybe we'll just consider this a heads up that it is changing in CEDEN 2.0. So I think I've already heard enough that we shouldn't just go ahead and try to change this or add this, because it would be a nightmare to add all those constituents if we added a new matrix. So, and Marco had a comment too that a lot of tools, are written scripts and things that have that sample water. So we will save this big shift for CEDEN 2.0 when that is really rolling out. But I'm hoping that we can get people using the matrix names more accurately. Like Amanda was saying, is people often do call runoff or stormwater or other things surface water or sample water, I should say. So I'm hoping we can get more clear on how people are reporting to be more accurate.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe matrices behind for now. So I think this is our last item, just a CEDEN 2.0 status update. For anyone who hasn't been following along, the Water Boards is working with a software vendor called EarthSoft to customize their existing platform, which is called Equus, to intake and store CEDEN data. And we've been calling this project CEDEN 2.0. And so our first phase that we've been working on for a while now is the chemistry. And then we've also kind of in the background also been working on the field results and habitat. And then after those are sort of settled, we've decided our next phase will be taxonomy data, but we really haven't we're not really beginning that yet. Marco asked, does habitat include bioassessment PHAB data? And the goal is yes. So that part is not as far along. So those, I guess the idea is hopefully chemistry will come out, and then any sort of basic field observations and field measurements we could get out around the same time. And then that PHAB may take a little longer, but it will fit in that same module. So we are kind of working on that as well. Cass, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when you say chemistry, tissue will be
Separate.
after. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I think we haven't really decided, but I think after taxonomy will probably be tissue and then tox for last, but that is yet to be determined. Okay, so this is sort of the same schedule I put up last time, that we would be doing a soft launch testing of the chemistry module with our lab that we contract with as the water boards in late summer. And we are pretty much on track doing that. So we've done a training with them, and we're going to do one more training, and then they're going to begin actually submitting some real data to the test system in September. So we'll probably have them testing in like September, October to kind of see, is it working as expected? Are they getting a bunch of errors we didn't think of? And so that'll just give us the feedback to see if it's ready for a public launch or if there's some tweaks we need to make before we release to the public. Some other things we're working on is getting API connections with the regional data centers, and we're hoping to make progress on that in fall. And then kind of testing field forms and the more basic field measures and habitat data submission toward the last couple months of this year. And then we're hoping that sometime in early 2026, I'm not going to say like January or anything too specific at this point, but definitely the idea is like that first quarter, we think we could release and have people, public users, start submitting. So that's sort of our overall schedule and just sort of our little more detail of our next steps. So probably that our lab will be testing September, maybe through November. And then we'd also like to release our like final chemistry data template. I know we've released a version and maybe the RDCs have a more recent version, but we're hoping after a little bit of the testing that we feel more confident that it's really the final version. And so we'll release that to the public. We're aiming for November to give people, time to look at it. And if they have systems to generate stuff, they can start getting those adjusted. And then we would also at the same time release like a submission guidance document that'll show some of the new rules for reporting like QC data and any other business rules that are included. So those are like our goals for this rest of this year that we want to share with you all. All right, looking at the chat. Hopefully I was clear on end of 2026 or beginning of 2026, Tori, in terms of public use.
Oh, you answered it. I'm sorry. I was like the
Okay,
next
no, that's
slides. I'm sorry.
No worries. And then Nathan asked, is it possible for users to test field forms while they're still malleable? Yes, and we will be utilizing you, Nathan. We're just not quite ready yet, but expect a call in like October, maybe, when we are a little more ready for that. Okay, and we've got 5 minutes to wrap up, or if there's any other questions on the CEDEN 2.0 status, I can try to answer them. But if not, our next meeting, I don't know if we put the appointment out yet, but we're planning for December 11th. One more before the end of the year and hopefully before people take off for holidays. I think we're going to be discussing matrices again. But if anyone has any other ideas for agenda items you'd like to discuss or add, you can always send us an email at our CEDEN inbox, CEDEN at Waterboards. And it looks like I'm going to come back again on the matrix, effluent matrix definition, and see if if there's enough support at the water boards to separate out wastewater and stormwater as two separate matrices. Marco asked, are you expecting the bioassessment field forms to go away and folks will be required to enter bioassessment PHAP through the EQUIS forms only? I guess that is our long-term expectation. That's, you know, I'll be honest, I've never entered data in a bioassessment field form, but there is, yes, and we will still be able to upload Excel or flat files. That's always going to be an option. So I know you guys kind of have your own tools already that you like, and so I don't want to take those away from you, but it could be possible that we could build the EQUIS tool to be just as nice, and then it would just, you know, be a seamless process. So we definitely are planning to work with you all when we really start working on the physical habitat stuff. I understand it's 24 pages. So yes, I know it's a significant data type. So we'll be in community with you on that when we are starting to work on it. Any other questions, comments, etc. before our last 2 minutes are up?
I'll just say thank you for going back and just looking at the matrix again one more time. Sorry to keep making you do that, but we do really appreciate that, and I think it would be nice to have that separation somewhere that we can sort out what's from what. So thank you.
Yeah, honestly, I'm sort of like kicking myself of like, why didn't I think of that? It sort of now feels like it would just make sense to have wastewater and stormwater as two separate matrices. But it's I want to chat with our various internal folks too before we make a change. So I appreciate all your patience and feedback on the matrices, and hopefully in the future I'll do better of always getting the feedback first before I make any new additions or changes.
Thanks so much, Tessa. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate all of you and your input. So
Thank
thanks,
you.
and we'll see you in December.
Bye.
Bye.